see, anyone else popping in? Oh, got some more. Yay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. This is our fourth guest speaker. I'd like to welcome Jeff Backus to the OCVAS's Little Guest Lecture Series. He's an RVT who works for the ASPCA's Animal Poison Control Center. And so I'm going to hand the control over to him. Let me see here. And he is going to take it away and get down to business. Jeff, it is all you, sir.
All right, wonderful. Let me share my screen here. Put together a couple slides for you guys. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming out on a Friday night to talk about things that you can do as an RVT. I think this is a really important topic. Myself, I've been in the field since 1995, so I'm in my 26th year, I guess, of doing this. And back in the day, really only ever thought about working in clinics, and actually worked in clinic all the way up until through October of 2020. And long thought about what else I could do in the field, but never really had the resources, if you will, to figure all that out. So I've seen a couple of these different kind of presentations to look at all the different things that you can do. And I used to teach at OCVAS, or at the time it was Heritage College, and before that Professional Veterinary Assistant School. And I used to tell my students all the time was, once you have your RVT, especially if you pair that with any sort of college degree, whether it's an associate's or a bachelor's, or shoot, now they even have master's degree that veterinary technicians can get. You could be unstoppable in this field and all the different things you can do. So I think it's really cool for this kind of series to be put together and see all the different things that you can do. So I think there's a huge problem in our field about technicians just kind of feeling bogged down in the clinical aspect and just not knowing really what else might be out there for them. And there's really a lot more than I think what we realize, and certainly what we give credit for. And maybe one of the positive things to come out of 2020 is that I think a lot of people got creative as far as what they could and were willing to do and blaze their own path a little bit. And so I think that's really been cool. And I can say the same kind of goes for myself as well. As I'll talk about tonight, and Jenny said there at the open, I work for the ASPC Animal Poison Control Center now. I work remotely. I work from home. And this is a job I've wanted for several years, but even not that long ago, just even prior to 2020, you had to go to Illinois for a period of time to their home base and train. And that's not the case anymore. As everything had to go to a remote format, they adapted into the same, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. So I just think now more than ever, there are more opportunities outside of a clinical setting than there ever have been. And my last clinical job was at Tufts University at the vet school, and I worked in the ICU there for the last 4 years. And I worked with several technicians that have been there for 20 plus years, and they will probably retire as a veterinary technician from clinical practice. And that's fantastic. That's just not the reality for a lot of people. A lot of clinics aren't set up with life insurance and retirement benefits and 401ks and all of those kinds of things as an academic setting is. So this kind of idea about what else you can do, I think it's a fantastic series for veterinary technician students to hear, for recent graduates or those that are veterinary assistants, all of the different things that you can do. So definitely would like to thank OCVAS for putting this on. And I think that by all accounts, I think this is a series they're going to do from time to time, because this is so needed really for our profession, to let our people know what else they can do. And I think that's awesome. I do want to say, if you guys have any questions about anything I talk about tonight, if you just, if you want to throw them in the chat, that's fantastic. If you want to have it more personal and just do one-on-one, feel free to email me. My email address is there at the bottom, djupsfan@gmail.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. A little bit about me. So I started, as I said, as a veterinary assistant in 1995. I started as an ROP student in high school. I don't even know if the California Regional Occupational Program still exists, but basically I took a class in high school. I had an externship at a general practice here actually in Mission Viejo, and got hired on there after that. And the owner of that clinic and I are still really, really good friends all these years later. Still help him out and do relief at his hospital from time to time. But those first several years of my career, I was a veterinary assistant. I didn't actually start RVT school until 2007. And I graduated from what was then Professional Veterinary Assistant School in 2009, what is now OCVAS. I was actually a classmate of Phil's, if you guys know Phil. Um, and in 2013, I got my VTS, my Veterinary Technician Specialty certification in emergency and critical care. I won't talk a whole lot about that tonight, but if you guys have any questions about the VTS process, the different disciplines, what have you, feel free to shoot me an email on that. If I can't answer your question, I can at least put you in contact with somebody that can. And I've been on the California RVT Association, the CARVTA Board of Directors since 2012. I'm currently the sitting president thereof. And I've done clinical work all the way since 1995. The last 16, 17 years of which has been emergency and critical care. And the last 4 of those, I was at Tufts University. My now wife was a veterinary student, and I moved there before her 3rd year of vet school, was there her last couple of years of internships. And then we came home to California last year. And then what I'm going to mostly talk about tonight is I started at the ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center in November of 2020. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm actually still in their training program technically, although I am, handling cases on the phones and stuff, but I'll talk about all that. And then I also co-founded and co-host the Vet Tech Cafe podcast in 2019. You guys can check out if you're not familiar with it already. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, did you ever think you could work from home as a veterinary technician? I certainly never did. I saw a number of people, especially when I worked general practice. I had a strong interest in doing sales and getting into the industry side of things. I was the person in the clinic that always talked to the reps when they came in. And I used to talk to the people at Hills and Pfizer, and that was kind of actually my dream job because I thought that was, probably more lucrative than certainly I was ever going to make in a veterinary hospital as a technician. And the travel and just a lot of it really, really appealed to me. And I actually never even applied. I never even really went down that route, just as I kind of evolved as a veterinary technician, as I moved into emergency and critical care and began specialization and what have you, that just became more and more exciting, and I kind of lost that drive to go down the other route there. But then father time catches up, and 26 years of literally backbreaking work in a veterinary clinic. I'm 6'6", so getting down on the ground to handle dogs or to pick stuff up just kept getting harder and harder and harder every year, and a little bit harder to get up off of the floor, and started looking at alternate options. And I had actually looked into the Animal Poison Control Center. The job I had at Animal Urgent Care in Mission Viejo, anytime we called poison control, it was always the technicians that called, which I thought was super cool because it was us that was talking to the veterinarians and the toxicologists there about these cases and taking all the notes about what to do. And I always really found that fascinating. And I want to say around 2014 or 2015, I looked into working there, and you had to go to Illinois to train. That was, and that was kind of a deal breaker. And so I kind of just, put that aside. I've always had a love of toxicology, but you certainly don't have to have a love of toxicology to do this job. They basically require 3 years as a credentialed technician. They do have veterinary assistant positions as well for non-credentialed staff. Currently, you do have to be or at least able to get a what is a CVT license in the state of Illinois. They're based in Urbana, Illinois, where the University of Illinois Vet School is. But you work remotely. And now there's even all the training is remote. So I was hired on in November. I was hired on with 7 other CVTs at the time. So our training group, we did everything over Zoom. So we were on Zoom from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday for an entire month. The training program was like unlike anything I've ever seen in veterinary medicine. It was so well laid out. You knew exactly what was happening down to the half hour of every day for that entire first month. When we went live on the phones and we actually started taking phone calls with clients, we were completely prepared. We had been piggybacking with other agents that were, taking live phone calls and listening in, and how they talk to clients, how they interact with clients. We were well versed in how to search the database and do all the calculations and all of that. So, we were ready to hit the ground running, but it was a very steep learning curve. And it was actually something that I kind of needed. It was a new challenge. And over the years throughout my career, I've kind of realized I need new challenges from time to time. And this was certainly one. You guys, even, we all take phone calls all day long in our clinical jobs. We talk to high stress clients. We take emergencies, and we, talk to clients in those high leverage, high stress situations. But the hard part for me on this was all the data entry and the data mining. This program that poison control uses, our database has approaching 200,000 potential toxins. So plants, different types of poisons, medications, anything you can dream up. Stuff I've never even heard of. When I type it in there, there's 15 products that are, related to that, or different brands of that same type of product. It blows my mind daily. And we were trained on all of that. They send us all of this equipment. So all of this came in a box. It was actually here in California before I even moved back. And I just set it up, and we went through the training program, and away we went. Their support structure is incredible. They have tons of really great management. Their IT support is wonderful. They actually even have maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had to call out for a shift for the first time. Literally just about 10 minutes before my shift, I started getting a migraine. And if any of you guys are migraine sufferers, I get that aura where I can't see for a period of 30 minutes or so. And I was not going to be able to stare at 3 computer screens to do my job, and certainly have the headphones on and talk to clients the whole bit. So I decided I was going to call out. They actually have a dedicated call out line where somebody from ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center, one of the managers, during normal business hours, just, fields for call outs, and they send out a group text. Hey, if anybody's available, if you want some hours today, there's hours available. And it's like no questions asked, no problem. Get some rest, take a day off, and, do what you got to do to feel better. And it's definitely something I've not really ever experienced in a clinical setting. And that was really, really, really cool too, because that was super short notice. And it's just so far, again, I'm kind of approaching 5 or 6 months now, and it's been a really incredible company to work for. So they're very committed to diversity and inclusion, of course, which are very strong topics in our field. That's really great to see. And again, I think the culture that they have created, I absolutely see myself retiring from this job, somewhere down the road. I have no desire to, at least at this point in time, to go anywhere else. There's room for advancement that doesn't really happen in a clinical type of position, all different kinds of paths that you can take. And I will say too, and I don't really have this on a slide, but one of the cool things is the American College of Toxicology. Their residency and their specialty program is unlike other types of specialty programs like surgery or internal medicine, or those, because of this job is so much more cerebral than it is clinical or practical. It's actually like a 10-year residency type program, but this is one of the only specialties or like specialty certificates you can get as a veterinary technician that a veterinarian can get as well. You can become, as a veterinary technician, boarded as a toxicologist, with, of course, a lot of hard work and a long time, but it is something that's super cool. So I hope several years down the road maybe to add that to my resume. We'll see. So what do I do? All of you guys are either graduating veterinary technician students or already veterinary technicians, and you think back to school. One topic that a lot of people either loved or hated was medical math. So what do? I do a lot of medical math, and all of those times you sat in the classroom thinking about, like, gosh, when am I ever going to do this? I don't calculate drug dosages at my job. I don't calculate CRIs or whatever it is. That is probably, of every phone call I take, that is a big part of the phone call. So, generally speaking, my work day, I work 5 8-hour shifts a day. I get a scheduled 1 hour lunch every day, and I get a little message that pops up on my computer screen that says, in 15 minutes, it's time for you to take your 1 hour lunch. How awesome is that? We don't really do that in veterinary medicine very often. And I just switch my status from, on phones to on lunch, and I'm on lunch for an hour. And again, working here in my home, I just go downstairs to my kitchen and make a sandwich and have lunch. And then I still have a half hour to relax and kind of take a deep breath and what have you, then before I get back on the phone. So what does it look like? So, a standard call, uh, again, think about those kind of unscheduled or emergencies that either call or come into your clinics. You have the whole gamut of people, right? Some that are very composed, very relaxed, very much, hey, my dog, I came home, chewed open bottle, have no idea how many pills he got into, but this is what he's doing. This is where we're at. And then you have some people that are in that same situation that are running around, saying things that aren't pertinent to anything, such as, well, the mail was dropped off at 1 o'clock today, and I came home and there was a bottle of open pills on the floor, and then the phone rang at 3:30, and you have to kind of put this whole story together, and so it kind of runs the gamut of all of that, and you have to kind of, help not calm people down, but help reassure them that they're taking the right steps by calling animal poison control. The cool thing about this job is we have a lot of autonomy to manage many of our own cases once we're fully trained. So, as I said earlier, we have approaching 200,000, I'll say products, but I mean potential toxins in our database. If you just put in rat bait in our database, probably 200 different types of rat bait come up. And so, we really focus on how to find the exact product that the owner is concerned about. And so we have a lot of, for many of these products, we have support staff protocols where, during training, every call I take, like where I'm at now, every call I take, I consult with a veterinarian, say, this is the history of the signalment of the patient, the history of the patient, just like rounding any patient in your hospital. This is the calculation. This is the dose in mg per kg. My protocol says this. This is what I'm going to tell the people, and the veterinarian may give you some extra advice or what have you, and then you go on your way. And then once you're fully trained, for a lot of those cases, certainly there are a lot of things that we have to consult with the veterinarians on. If it's an exotic animal species, certain more, I'll say, more potent or more toxic type of products we have to consult with the veterinarian on. But a lot of it, probably 60 to 70% of the cases, I will have autonomy to manage on my own based on all of our written protocols. So, as an example, a phone call we commonly take, owner is gone, right? Just like you guys do in clinics. They've been gone at work all day. They come home, bottle of chewed open pills on the floor. So vitamin D, this first example here, the exposure of vitamin D for some reason is something we take a lot of calls about. And I just had this call yesterday. A dog ate an entire 150 count bottle of 5,000 IU vitamin D soft gels. And that's a lot of vitamin D. And it was a big lab, but it was still well over a kidney failure dose of a vitamin D. So in that kind of situation, I give them a case number, the callback phone number, and I send them into a clinic for treatment. If it's something, say, like another common call we get are those little silica gel packets that you get in some food items or clothing items, that say "do not eat" on them. Dogs are apparently are magnetized to those little things. We take a lot of calls about those, and those are very mild. And we can just walk an owner through how to monitor and manage those at home. And so we kind of run the full gamut there. Um, Another kind of example case we take here, what we call a rule out case, where they come home from work, or all of a sudden their animal is just showing X, Y, or Z clinical signs. In this example, I said vomiting, tremoring, and collapse, but it could, really be anything that you think of. And they say, I don't have any idea what we could have gotten into. There's a lot of medications in the house. It's possible somebody dropped a pill and we just don't know about it. And so, then I take literally all of those medications, enter them into the computer, and then I cross-reference all of those against the clinical signs, see which ones fit, which ones don't, line that up with the timeline, and so on and so forth. And then, again, we get the owner the help that they need there. So, it really runs the gamut on types of calls that we take. Some, of course, are very minor. Some, of course, are much more, I'll say, advanced or much more serious. We have, generally all of our agents are categorized as either mild, moderate, severe, or interrupt. And if you get an interrupt agent, some of those are like gopher bait or zinc phosphide, is a big one. Hops, not like necessarily hops that are in, say, like herbal supplements or that, but the hops that are actually used in brewing beer. Spent hops are an interrupt. There are dozens of those, and as soon as you type in the agent, it kind of flags with what that is, so you kind of, before you really get too deep in the case, have an idea. And when something is an interrupt, we change our status to interrupt to basically let everybody else on the phones know, I have this very serious case. I basically have priority over everybody else to consult with the doctor to get these people into the clinic and get them all the information they need. Or if the pet is really symptomatic, I just say, go to the vet, call us back when you get there, let them start treating the pet, and then we can kind of go through this case. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but and that's why the learning curve and the training is so in depth. But it's really, really fascinating. And again, my love for toxicology, I love doing all of this stuff, and the math, and figuring out all this stuff is super fun. Some of our most common calls, chocolate for sure. I bet a lot of you guys can relate as well. Pretty much from the time Halloween candy comes out all the way through Easter is basically chocolate season, because in there you have Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, and then Easter. And so, there's a lot of big chocolate holidays. So basically those 6 months out of the year, if I take 30 phone calls in a day, sometimes 10 or 15 of them are chocolate calls. And you wouldn't believe, you walk up and down the candy aisle in a grocery store and you see all of those different kinds of candies. I've got every one of them in my database. And I do, then that's what I do, is just calculate the amount of chocolate consumed against the dog's body weight, compare it to our level of concern with methylxanthine or the toxic compound in chocolate, see where they're at, and then figure out how to manage it from there. Rat bait is probably the second most common call that we take. I live in South Orange County here in California, and I'm kind of in a little bit of a bubble in terms of, vermin and different things like that. I don't really ever remember taking that many rat bait cases in clinics, but taking calls from all over the U.S. We take calls from Canada. We actually take calls from all over the world. We do get calls from zoos or wildlife, refuge type places in other continents as well. Rat bait is a very, very common call. And if you ever go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, if you look at all of the different types of products that are there of the rat baits and how similar they all are, and so many of our calls are, I don't know, my dog just ate this green block of rat bait. I looked on Google and it's this particular product. They don't understand that there are three major types of rat bait, and that if we guess it's this one and it's one of these other two, their dog is going to die. And I have to walk them through that and walk them through why it is so important that we get this right, because if we guess wrong, there are potentially fatal consequences. So do they trust their Google search? Or do they have the packaging available that they can read me the product name or the EPA number or what have you? So rat bait is always a really tricky one we absolutely try to get 100% right. Otherwise, we have to treat it as an unknown, which means we treat for all three major types of rat bait. Vitamins and supplements is another big call that we get. As I mentioned earlier, the vitamin D, but which is probably in terms of vitamins, the most concerning agent that we have. But then of course, all the supplements we worry about, elemental iron, generally calcium, not too much, but maybe magnesium or zinc or some of those, if they're, really high concentrated. But, a lot of times we get calls that, if an entire family was sitting at the table and they all had their doses of multivitamins out, and the dog, so the doorbell rang, they all got up to go to the door. The dog just went and cleaned all of the vitamins off, and there's 6 different vitamin products between adults and children's and what have you. And we've got to calculate all of that, just to make sure that, again, usually the vitamin D is the big thing, but just to make sure there's no big problem. And then, of course, all the seasonal stuff. Lilies are big this time of year. We take a lot of calls about lilies, but we also ask owners to email in photographs of the plant, because there are false lilies. Species like Alstroemeria are a false lily. They don't cause the kidney failure in cats like Hemerocallis or the true Lilium species do. So we ask owners to email in photographs, and we post it in our group chat so that we can identify it and make sure it's a true or a false lily. Mushrooms at springtime are really bad. And mushroom identification is really, really difficult, unless you can get down to like a cellular level, but just based on appearance is often really difficult. So a lot of times we just kind of focus on supportive care there and managing the signs that we see. And wintertime, ice melt. If any of you live in a more snowy area, the salt products that they put on the sidewalk to prevent icing or what have you, we get a lot of calls on that. They're just kind of starting to wrap up now. The last couple months, we've had a lot of ice melt calls, and then of course along those lines as well as antifreeze. Probably all familiar with antifreeze being a big problem in causing kidney failure. But there are, which is, the main ingredient we worry about is ethylene glycol, but there are propylene glycol products which aren't nephrotoxic or don't cause kidney failure. And so there are, again, those products out there that, my dog drank antifreeze, is he going to die? Well, we actually have to figure out what product it is we're dealing with, because if your product doesn't contain ethylene glycol, then no, I can probably walk you through how to manage this at home. But if this product did contain ethylene glycol, then yeah, we probably need to be at the clinic, half hour ago. And so those are all the kinds of things that we kind of have to weed through. But again, it's fascinating work. The Some of the research that the Animal Poison Control Center does on their calls is out of this world. They were actually the first to identify that lilies were toxic to cats. And in our training, they showed us from the early 80s, I want to say it was 82 or 83, the actual like yellow legal pad of paper that the people were writing down calls about lilies on, and like the question mark, like, hey, this is actually the 4th or 5th cat that ate lilies that now has kidney failure. And they looked into it and realized that's what it was. They're doing a lot of work right now trying to figure out what's in grapes and raisins that causes kidney failure in dogs. And so lots of cool stuff that goes on with that kind of stuff too, that we as technicians can be involved in the research and the data mining and kind of figuring all this stuff out on. Some stats. So this just pertains to the Animal Poison Control Center through ASPCA. Of course, there's the Pet Poison Helpline in North America as well, but we take almost 1,000 calls a day, which is quite a lot. I think if any of you have ever tried to call the poison control center, or if you ever hear anything negative, I think a lot of times it's the wait time. And that's why we take almost 1,000 calls a day. And I don't care how many people you have on, it's hard. Each full case takes at least 15 minutes to go through from start to finish. It just takes a long time to get through, all these cases, especially in the busier time of the day. So in 2020, as we got to New Year's Eve, they did, a fun game where you could, for New Year's Eve, you could basically email in what you thought the last case number of the year was going to be, because they're of course sequential, and then what the last toxin of the year was going to be as well. Of course, the last toxin of the year was a rat bait, but we had, I think the final number was 272,000 and something cases for 2020. And keep in mind as well, that's not every phone call. There's a lot of phone calls that we got that unfortunately the wait time was too long, the pet was too sick, or whatever the case may have been, that the owner hung up and we just never got to their case. And so there's, we still took over 272,000 cases last year. Knowing that those are some problems that we face, they have hired since I started. Every month they have had a new group of trainees start. They've hired about 50 CVTs just since November of last year, and they are still hiring. They hire, generally speaking, about once every 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're interested and you follow the ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center on social media, they usually post when the postings go live. I would say if it's something you're interested in, definitely jump on it quick, because they usually get a ton of applicants and the posts aren't up long. But it's definitely something worth looking into. And we've also brought on an additional, I think, about 8 DVMs in that same time frame as well. We have, to my knowledge, I think there are 10 veterinary toxicologists on our staff, probably an additional 25 or 30 veterinarians, and then probably, I'm going to say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 CVTs and veterinary assistants right now that work on the phones. And there's a ton that goes on. I will say the culture, the company, it's a really, really great place to work. So far, I'm very happy with it. And I think that's basically everything that I have in terms of like prepared slides for you guys. So let me go back to the start here, and I would like to open it up to any questions that you guys have.
I totally muted myself and then started talking. Dang it, I did it again. I actually have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
When you said, like, you were talking about exotic cases, did you mean exotic toxins or exotic animals that you were dealing with?
I guess when I mentioned that, I meant exotic species, but I guess really exotic toxins as well. There are, of course, a number of things, a number of plants, a number of medications that we just don't get calls on very often. So those generally, I at least have to consult with a vet about. But then, if it's a rabbit that got into this owner's medication, or a bird, or, something along those lines, those are always going to be ones that I'll have to consult with a veterinarian on. So I guess the answer is a little bit of both.
Okay. Because working at an exotic animal hospital, we've dealt with like reptile confiscations and stuff. And there was actually a bust a few years ago where a guy had illegally smuggled in a bunch of exotics, and like we weren't involved with it, thank God, but animal control told us about it, and they had bearded lizards and mambas and all of this stuff. So it piqued my interest significantly. So I was just like, ooh.
Yeah, and of course, like the ASPCA does a lot of that kind of stuff, and we do get email information about that. But our role here is really just focused on the Animal Poison Control Center, and like that's largely what we do. But we do take a number of calls about, what I'll say are like, run of the mill toxins that just instead of a cat or a dog, it's a rabbit or a bird or a snake or lizard or what have you. Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys deal with envenomations at all?
Yes, very rarely. And actually, I should say too, this will be my first spring. So I'm very curious to see how many of those we actually get calls about. I haven't had any yet. When it's come to that kind of thing, it's more so been, my dog or my cat, whatever, ate a dead mouse or a dead rat, and they're worried about what killed that mouse or that rat that now their cat has eaten or what have you. Um, so I'll be curious to see if we get snake envenomations or different bug bites or spider bites, through spring and summer.
Yeah.
I know those types of things are in our database. I just don't know how many calls we get about them yet.
Oh, okay, cool. And then you were talking about with the new hirings and stuff, like obviously there's a need for it.
Mhm.
Is ASPCA Poison Control constantly hiring? Like are they, or do they just do like
That
batches?
they do it in batches. And so what I think that they do is they hire on a batch. And like I said, the initial training program is about a month. And then after that first 4 weeks, you go live on the phones, and then they kind of evaluate where they're at, and then, see what their needs are. And then they may post another, another posting. Like I said, since October, so I started in November and I applied in October. There was one group ahead of me, but then there's been a group every month since then. And this group, the group that starts actually on Monday, is 14 CVTs and 2 veterinarians. So, I mean, they are still actively, and they just went through the application and interview process this month. So they are, in my mind, still clearly like hiring. And it's also, I mean, I really love this job. I'll say it's probably just like any other job that is not for everyone. It's high stress, it's high leverage, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of data entry. And so I can see how it's not for everyone. And so maybe there are people that either drop out or people that leave or what have you, but I don't see a ton of turnover, but I feel like they've just opened it up because the demand is so high.
I see. So it's almost like a monthly little thing that is going on
Yeah.
at the moment, at least.
Yes, seemingly, at least the last about 6 months or so.
Okay. Then we've got a few little things in the chat. Lucy Nash says, not a question, just wanted to say hi to Jeff.
Hi,
Seriously, surprised.
Lucy.
Medical math. Thanks to you.
Thank you, Lucy. It's great to hear from you.
And then M says, just to clarify, when clients call the ASPCA, they're talking with a technician who gets the signalment and history, and then the technician consults with the toxicologists. If clients have to take their pet to the vet, the veterinarian speaks with the toxicologist about supportive care, etc. They're asking for just
Correct. Yes. So you're I'll say basically 100% correct there. So when a client calls in, they call in on the main line, and it's generally going to be one of the support staff that answers that call. Occasionally, it may be a veterinarian right off of the bat, but it would be somebody like a technician or assistant. And just as you say, they get the signalment, the history about the exposure, whatever product information they can. Then they calculate the dose, so like mgs per kg of that particular toxin. And then again, I'll say me here as I'm in training, I consult with the veterinarian about every case. Those that have been there and gone through more additional training, they can, if it's a minor thing, they can go through their protocol and say, you know what, this is a high enough dose, you need to go to the vet. This is your case number, have the vet call us when you get there. Or they can walk the client through what to monitor for and how to manage it. When the client goes to the clinic and calls in, yes, they will be talking to maybe not necessarily one of the toxicologists, but definitely one of the veterinarians. And then again, our veterinarians are they're regular DVMs, but they've had additional training in toxicology, or they may be even working towards their board certification in toxicology. And then, they may consult with a toxicologist, or just depending on the flow and who's on what shifts, they may talk to a toxicologist directly as well. Yeah.
okay.
So kind of luck of the draw there.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I actually had a question. So how does it when the patient, I guess you could say, calls you and then has to go to the vet, how do
Mhm.
you know it's the same patient? Do you get the same patient calling you back specifically, or will they possibly be
No,
transferred to
so
someone
yeah, so when I send a if I take a phone call and say it's a high dose of Rimadyl and they've got to go, say it's a kidney dose of Rimadyl and they've got to go to the clinic. So I give them the case number and a callback phone number, which is different than the number they called in on.
else? Oh,
And
okay.
that they give that phone number to the veterinary staff, and that number will go to a different queue that goes directly to the veterinarians.
Ah,
And that phone number actually, so even cases that we manage that can stay at home, right? We just have to have the owners monitor for things and they can stay at home. We give the owners the same case number and the same callback phone number, and they can call us back and ask any questions that they have as well throughout the duration of the case. And then they'll speak to probably a veterinarian at that point as well, because it goes to that same queue. So yeah, it just goes like, it's pretty rare. It does happen that you get the same client calling back in, on follow up or what have you, but I would say 99 out of 100 times, it's somebody else that answers the phone just because there's so many of us on.
okay. I know.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I haven't had to deal with poison too often in my career. Knock
Yeah.
on wood.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
So I would say to you guys, if you ever have toxicology cases, make sure you get as exact product information as you can. Timeline, body weight, and vitals, of course, are hugely important. And then, calculate your dose and go from there. But I would say poison control, whether it's us or Pet Poison Helpline, is a huge resource. I can't tell you how many calls we take of pets that are treated in a hospital, or clients that take their pet to the hospital that didn't need to go to the hospital because it wasn't that bad, or that we're getting treatment that maybe wasn't necessary, or we're not getting the treatment that they needed. And so I'd say poison control is a huge, huge resource for your toxicology cases.
Okay. And then Carrie says in the chat, thank you so much for, excuse me, thank you for taking the time to do this. I had no idea this would even be an option for me. This is very interesting. I have wondered what else I can do when my back gives out in my old age.
I'll tell you, Carrie. In my training group, I'm 42 years old. I've been doing this since I was 16. And while I don't have back or shoulder or knee or anything like that I can't do this physically anymore, there are people in my training group who have been in clinics for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it was, suffered an injury, and they just can't really do the physicality of clinical work anymore. And so this was a job they sought out to be able to still be a veterinary technician, right? To still have this fulfilling work, but just not have the physical requirements that go along with it. And have been really, really quite happy with that. So yeah, you would not be alone, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, it's really neat because I know another option was like veterinary insurance and stuff like that, but this is way more interesting and way I like this path
Yeah.
a lot better than
Yeah.
I like the medical path better.
Yeah, yeah. This for sure. Again, doing the math, I find the medicine of it just so fascinating. Like, one of the things, a couple of phone calls I've taken, that have just blown my mind. Just to kind of give you an example, Visine eye drops. Their whole. If you've ever seen their commercials on TV, right? The whole get the red out of your eyes. Um, you would have no idea, but the ingredient that's in Visine to get the red out is an alpha 2. It's basically a different drug than dexmedetomidine. So what happens when a dog eats a bottle of Visine? It's got to go to the clinic and get a shot of antecedent. And that's legit. Like, and that's like, I find that stuff so fascinating. And that's now my world, and I absolutely love it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very neat. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I did not know that. I wonder if that's why in like Wedding Crashers, when he put the eye drops in the guy's drink, he started just vomiting violently.
Yep. Exactly. It's exactly why. Yep. So yeah, just fun stuff like that. So yeah.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I know I've asked a ton of questions. How about any of you guys? Sorry, this was just tickling my brain nonstop. M asks, does ASPCA offer any continued education for RVTs for their license?
Great question. They currently do not. However, it is something that they are working on because they do see a demand for it, especially this year after so much has gone virtual. They do a lot in-house for their own people, like it's their technicians and that give a lot of like we have monthly rounds where we have an hour that's off the phones and we all go to rounds and you know, people present on different things. So we have a lot of our own in-house. We don't really have that outside yet, but it is something that they are, I think, working to bring out because they definitely see a need for it.
They don't go to conferences and do little lectures there?
So I know that some of the toxicologists do, and they, you know, definitely like maybe have a toxicology track, but they don't offer like this week is actually, it's wonderful that I'm doing this week because this week is actually pet poison prevention week. And so they had 3 webinars this week. I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, one each given by a different toxicologist. And it was, you know, one was different toxins you can see on an x-ray and you know, one was kind of medical math and things of that sort, but those were race approved, but it's not very often that they do that kind of a thing where it's, you know, like this where you could just attend a webinar and get an hour of CE there. I think that's something that they're looking at, but they're just not there yet.
Okay. Mary says, thanks so much for your excellent presentation, Jeff. I'm in my 50s and was worried that there may not be opportunities for me. Now for a silly question. Now that cannabis is being legalized in more states, are you getting lots of questions regarding weed ingestion?
Yes, quite. It's always a common call that we get. I will say, depending on where in the country the caller is calling from, you know, they may just readily say, yep, my dog ate an edible last night. It was 100 milligrams of THC and tell you exactly what you need to know. But just like in clinics, you know, we do still get those phone calls where it's, you know, they're calling saying, you know, maybe their dog got an ibuprofen, but they're describing classical signs of THC ingestion. And we, you know, just as you do in practice, subtly say, you know, hey, these signs don't really fit for this, but they fit for this. Is there any possibility? And then we still get those kind of, you know, very roundabout, well, you know, the neighbor down the street came by to drop off some mail the other day and he must have dropped a joint on his way out. You know, like we still get a lot of those. But we do get quite a few calls about it. And unless they're severely affected and depending on the time frame, I would say in my short experience, 80 to 90% of them, we tell them to manage at home and monitor at home. And if they become more affected, then go in for treatment. But a lot of them, we just have them manage at home.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Mary, that is definitely not a silly question.
Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
And especially in my experience, I've seen that the way the weed is being grown out nowadays, it's very different from when my dad, who's a veterinarian, very different from how it was grown back in the 60s when he was growing up. It's more concentrated now.
Yeah.
So we had a
Yeah.
case come in where a dog ate just one pot brownie and the concentration of weed was so strong that we didn't even see signs of chocolate toxicity. It was all weed and it was just like half of a brownie.
Yeah.
And that's how strong the concentration of weed is nowadays.
Yeah, we, you know, they have a saying there, and I think it's really on point. The dose makes the poison. You know, if you drink enough water, it's toxic. If you take enough oxygen, if you're on 100% oxygen long enough, it's toxic. So the dose makes the poison. And when you start getting into that, yeah, like the oils and the resins or, you know, things that you cook with certainly are more concentrated. But, you know, like I took a call yesterday. It was 2 dogs that had chewed open a 500 count bottle of ibuprofen. And the big lab was showing CNS signs, which is the highest level of toxicity. And the little dachshund, the much smaller dog, was showing some vomiting, but not really any other signs. But for the big lab, it took, 60 pills to get to the CNS toxic range, whereas for the little dog, it only took 6. So, the dose makes the poison. How much did they get? It doesn't matter what it is. There's a lot of ibuprofen dogs we have stay home because it's a very low dose of ibuprofen. Same with chocolate. We all, everybody calls and says, I know chocolate is so bad for dogs, and we calculated and it's a tiny dose. But certainly there are those that it's just that much more severe. So the dose makes the poison. So anybody else?
M says, thank you so much for your time and presentation, Jeff. I'm so glad OCVAS is offering these Zoom meetings of different options that we can do as an RVT. I've always been interested about the possibility of working either with the ASPCA or Pet Poison Helpline, but never knew how to go about it.
Yeah.
Oh, this was perfect for you. Yay.
Absolutely. I highly recommend it. I honestly couldn't say for ASPCA animal poison control. I don't know if it's available to do in all 50 states. I can tell you my training group of 8 people, we were all in 8 different states, and none of them was Illinois, where the company's based out of. I know Pet Poison Helpline has some state restrictions. I don't know about California specifically, but obviously with the ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center, California is a go. So definitely look into it. I highly recommend it. I think it's a great fit for me. I understand why it wouldn't be a great fit for some people, but again, I think it's just, as you said, it's the whole point of this series, right, is all of the different things you can do. And I think it's just another really cool avenue that you could look into taking. So.
All right. If there's no more questions, we are
going once, going twice. Well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight and asking questions. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And at least, again, I hope if nothing else, this and this whole series gives you something to think about and gets you excited about all the different things you can do with your credential, because there really is way more in this field than we learn about in school, than we often talk about, than we often realize is out there. So major props to OCVAS for doing this.
Oh, thank you for sucking up.
Thank you
so much for talking. This was very interesting.
You're welcome. If anybody has any questions they want to ask me directly, feel free to email me. My email address is there. Otherwise, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. It was great chatting with you guys.
Yes, and if anyone ever has any questions about any of our past guest lectures or lecturers, you can always reach out to me on the email that's posted on our little flyers that we put on our social media. And then we finally have a YouTube channel going. As soon as we get these videos edited down, the awkward silences and stuff, we're gonna post up these series so you can watch them at your leisure and check them out and revisit them. So once those are posted, our Facebook and Instagram will put up little announcements saying when they're available. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening, Jeff, to talk to us.
Oh, absolutely.
Very interesting, very informative, and we wish you the best of luck in helping all those little aminals
yes, absolutely,
get into stuff that they really shouldn't be getting.
They really shouldn't. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. You all have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you guys. Thanks.